Hello everybody, welcome to the kitchen. On the table today I've got two new tools I'm excited to try out. The Better 3/4 and myself have been getting interested in bushcraft recently. So naturally you need a couple tools. There's some stuff that goes along with that. And you know, myself, I have a lot of shop tools but not a lot of woodworking tools and hand tools like that. So one of the things that is pretty common and important to have for bushcraft is some sort of a saw or a folding saw. And I did some research, and there's a couple pretty common names and brands out there. This particular one is a Bahco Laplander. Seemed very common with all the bushcraft people, even even people that were really more into it. They always seem to have one of these. There's the Corona razor tooth as well. That one seemed pretty nice. It's a decent price. I think it's 10 or 15 bucks, but I didn't see any of the bushcraft people on YouTube using them, and you can say that's a good judgment or a bad way to judge it, but that was one of the reasons why I didn't go for it. And the last one that I remember off the top of my head was the Silky Gomboy. Looked like a very nice saw, but I heard that the blades were kind of thin, which can work in your favor, but they're liable to bend or break if you don't use them right. And also the bolster part of the saw seemed to be made out of metal, which obviously is stronger but adds more weight, and I wanted something lightweight as well, and this is a very light saw. And also I got this knife. These two things came in a package deal for $30. And I figured couldn't really go wrong. So I just took these out of the package. I'm going to go over my first impressions with you, and then there's a ton of other videos out there of people cutting with both the knife and the saw and doing cutting competitions between various saws, see how many strokes it takes to go through a piece of wood or whatever. I'm not going to do that. I don't have any other saws. I'm just going to share with you my first impressions. Myself as a tool guy, I've handled a lot of stuff. I've used a lot of tools, and I have gotten to the point, I feel, where I can pick up a tool and just kind of judge it, just intuitively know if it's half decent or not. So let's go over the saw first. It's nice. It's got a nice grippy handle, not super grippy. I think it's just right. Like I said, nice lightweight. I think it's a good size as well for putting in your backpack, but still big enough to cut down or cut up a fairly large piece of wood if you needed to. Comes with a leather lanyard. I see a lot of people replace these with blaze orange paracord lanyards, which I think is a good idea. The bolster is plastic, and I don't know what kind of plastic it is, but again, just with my feel and my intuition, it's a cheaper plastic. It doesn't feel very solid, or I don't know if you can hear that. It just sounds plasticky, for lack of a better term. So this hopefully is not a weak point, but it may be. I don't know. Also, here's the lock button. It's a plastic lock button, and the hinge for it is just the plastic, which I'm not a fan of. It's cheap and easy to make, easy to manufacture. The technical term for it is a flexure, something like that, where you use the material itself as the hinge or the joint or whatever. But anyway, it does lock closed. A little bit of blade movement when it's closed, but who cares? Push the button, it opens. It doesn't flop around. The joint is very stiff, which is nice. Locks open. There's a hair of, I don't even know if you could see it, there's a hair of wiggle up and down with the blade when it's locked open. I really don't think that matters at all. Has some sort of a, I assume, rust preventative and possibly a anti-friction coating on the blade. It does not appear that the blade is ground to like a reverse taper. On some higher end saws, the back of the blade, the spine, is ground thinner, kind of opposite the way a knife would be. So your teeth are the thickest part of the saw, and therefore your saw doesn't bind. The other way to prevent your saw from binding is you give the teeth a set. And you know, I didn't look. I'm looking now. I could be wrong, but I don't see much of a set at all to those teeth. They all seem pretty flat. But that apparently doesn't seem to be an issue. No one's complained of the blade binding, but you know, it's quicker, easier, and cheaper just to stamp out this blade, grind the teeth in it, and be done with it, rather than either grind the blade thinner in the back or set the teeth. Of course, when you set the teeth, that makes a wider kerf. That's more material you have to remove, more effort on your part, but also you don't want the blade to bind. Also, the other thing I did not like was the teeth themselves, the cutting edges and the tips are coated in that same material that's on the rest of the blade. And I'm not really crazy about that. You know, you go through the effort of grinding and sharpening and making a nice sharp saw blade, and then you coat this crap on it and it covers the sharp edge. So I can, you know, drag my thumb across it, and I mean, yeah, it's sharp, but it doesn't really like dig in and grab the way I would have expected it to. So we'll see how that goes. And inside here, a little hard to see, but you can see the lock pin in there, and there's some sort of a metal spring like towards my thumb side of the handle. And I don't quite see how it locks into the blade itself, but it kind of looks like a lockback style mechanism where there's a leaf spring that clicks into some notch or hole on the pivot end of the blade. So overall, great price, nice and light. It's not floppy or clanky janky or anything like that. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about this kind of cheap chintzy plastic bolster. I don't like how the teeth are coated with the same black material. Kind of kills the edge a little bit. And there's no set to the teeth and no grind to the spine of the saw of the blade. But I'm sure it'll work just fine. It does lock nicely open and closed. It's a nice stiff pivot. It doesn't just flop around, and it's a good size, nice grippy handle. So I am happy with it. I'm curious to see how it works. Now on to the knife. In addition to being a tool guy, I am a knife guy as well. I especially was years ago. I used to be into blacksmithing and knife smithing, and I've held and used a lot of crappy knives and a lot of good knives, and I was a little skeptical of this. It was super cheap, and just looking at the pictures, it just kind of looked chintzy, but I figured, hey, why not? Let's try it out. I looked at some reviews, didn't seem terrible. I do actually kind of like the sheath. Yeah, it is plastic. A lot of people might prefer Kydex or leather or whatever, but yeah, I don't know how tough it is. I'm not going to test it to destruction, but I think for a knife sheath it'll be fine. And it does retain the knife fairly well. So there we go, and I can pull it out. Oh, of course it has a belt clip as well, and a drain hole in the very tip. Knife itself, I gotta say I was a little surprised. The second I pulled it out and put my hand on it, it just fits my hand pretty damn nice. I got about a medium size hand. I wear a medium glove, and it just fits just right. I think people with a small or large hand, it would be okay as well. No guard or bolster or anything, just a little swell there to keep your hand from sliding, but it's not so obtrusive that it would get in the way if you're really choking up on the knife to do some close quarters whittling or whatever. Got some sort of over molded rubber grippy handle, just like any you know, screwdriver or whatever has the same sort of deal. That, who knows, that may come off, that may be pretty well on there, but it does grip pretty well. The blade, I gotta say, I was pretty impressed with it. I don't know what kind of stainless it is. It just says stainless steel. I would go on a limb and assume it's 440 because that's a pretty common, fairly cheap knife steel. It actually is magnetic, and I believe 440 is magnetic. Correct me if I'm wrong. But let's see how it butchers this post-it note. I gotta say, I was impressed. Look at that. Very, very nice. This knife is is a Scandi grind, or Scandinavian grind, which I find interesting. I hadn't really heard of it before. This main bevel here is the only bevel. There's no secondary bevel that you would sharpen. This angle here is what your sharpening stone would contact, which I find kind of interesting. It's a lot more material to remove when you're sharpening your knife, but I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that, but it does seem to be fairly popular in the bushcraft world. One downside with this as a bushcraft knife, the spine is not sharp and square, so you can't strike a fire steel with it. You can't shave off shavings off a stick for tinder or kindling. And in conjunction with that comment, you can see on the spine here, you can see the telltale sign of this blade just being stamped out of a sheet of steel. You can see the shear marks left by the die. It was cleaned up, there's no sharp edges left, but there are die marks. So that's not a big deal. I can easily grind or file this flat and square and sharp. So I'm not overly concerned. It's just about what I expected. So for $30, I think I'm pretty happy with these two tools. So I'm going to go out in the garage and play around with these a little bit. Well, this little knife is definitely nice. It cuts well. I have a piece of dry something wood. Poplar possibly, I'm not entirely sure. But it's dry wood, and it does quite a nice job of shaving everything off. Another thing I tried is making a notch, like if you're doing a figure 4 trap. So that's a little challenging. If you don't have a real sharp edge, you got to cut directly across the grain. But that just chomps it right out. Pretty happy with it. Comfortable handle, sharp. Hopefully it stays sharp. We're going to be whittling a bunch more stuff in here throughout the winter, so I'll be using this and see how the edge holds up and see how it is to sharpen it. Like I said, sharpening is going to be a little different for me because I'm not used to the Scandinavian grind. It's a lot more material you have to remove. So you definitely have to be on top of the edge, and when it gets a little bit dull, that's when you ought to sharpen it, because it's less material to remove, less time you'll spend. Now up to this point, like I said, I like working with metal. I'm not much of a woodworker. For our little projects that we've been playing around with in here, I've been using a hacksaw to cut wood, which actually works pretty well. But anyway, I did a couple test cuts, and I am quite happy. The coating wore off, the very tips of the cutting edges and revealed quite a sharp edge. Like just as I'm gently touching it, it's sticking to my fingers like Velcro. So there's definitely a sharp edge under there, so I guess that coating isn't that big of a deal, but still is kind of a, you know, a little fit and finish thing. But oh yeah, definitely sharp. It seems to cut a little bit on the push stroke, mostly on the pull stroke. I guess that that helps for a couple reasons. I mean, it's safer when you're for pulling. If your hand slips, it just slips off the handle rather than slipping onto the blade. But look at this thing go. Bam! I like that. Definitely like it. I found that since it cuts a little bit less on the push, if I start my cut by pushing, then I can go back and forth. Pretty sweet. I'm happy with it. Oh yeah, she's sharp now. Very good. I'll play more with these as we continue on with our bushcraft projects, and maybe I'll do an update as things go on, but I gotta say I'm pretty happy for $30 for a beginner, I guess you could say. I guess I'm definitely a beginner. Quite happy. So thanks for watching, everybody. Hit the like button if you like this. Hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my projects. Yeah, I usually do, you know, engine stuff. I got the Bovard and Seafang there, and the Ruston there, and a million other little projects here and there. But these tools are pretty cool. It's fun. This is a new new avenue for me to play around in. So thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned for more.